there are a lot of naysayers and say, oh no, we know it's not perfect. And I do believe it's not perfect, of course. But even if we just can cut the time in half, right? These are millions of lives that could be saved. I think we need to take some risks. And I think these are risks worth taking.
You're on Helical Brew, AI Thought Leaders. Ingrid Barbosa-Farias is here to break down how AI is changing drug discovery. Let's get into it. Trust me, you'll want to hear this. Welcome, Helical Brew listeners and viewers, to our episode in our ongoing series around AI thought leading and AI thought leaders. And I'm super happy to have on board a AI thought leader and someone who's actually started a business within the space and is using AI technology for molecular simulation to accelerate drug discovery. Ingrid Barbosa-Farias, welcome to the show. So glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today, and where are you coming to us from today?
So I'm actually in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Right on.
I used to live in San Diego, but so we recently moved here.
So we're balanced today. We've got two on the East Coast, two on the West Coast, or Eastern time zone. I don't know. Toronto's pretty close. It's almost there to the coast. But well, welcome to the show, and we're super glad to have you with us. So molecular simulation and AI. So when I first started doing a little research on the company that you started, by the way, Ingrid started a company in this space, and you and I had met actually in San Diego, and you were working at a company at the time, and we have this meetup in San Diego that's still going. Actually, it started just taking a little bit of a detour. That started in right around COVID. It was an online meetup. It was actually like house party.
As with most things.
Well, yeah. Well, we'll pull the spider webs off of an old technology that doesn't exist anymore. But there was an app called House Party that was used a lot during the COVID times for people to have meetups. And so we had kind of a happy hour. Anyway, that turned into an in-person happy hour. And then we had talked a little bit there at some of those events about what you were doing. And then, I was kind of scrolling LinkedIn, and I saw a post pop up, and your company was mentioned. So tell us about SimAtomic and what you're doing there. And it's
sort of actually cool name.
And what a cool name, but also maybe a little backstory at how I always love to hear the backstory of how somebody who goes from, working at a company to founding their own company, kind of what was that process like?
Okay, so maybe I'm going to start off with my background. So my background is molecular biology. I started working in several small biotech startups, which were focused on small molecule drug discovery. And I actually started out at the bench as a scientist, and then later I transitioned into software engineering. So one thing I noticed while working in biotech is how difficult it was for non-experts to use these really cool tools like docking and molecular dynamic simulation. And this is what really prompted me to start SimAtomic. It's because I thought it really shouldn't be so difficult. And our goal is to tear down technical barriers and to make it very easy for scientists to use those tools. And so SimAtomic is basically a no-code online platform that allows researchers and scientists to run molecular docking and molecular dynamic simulation and to integrate it with AI.
Yeah, fantastic. And molecular simulation, I mean, for me, I'm a roboticist. I come from the robotics side of the world, but that's been it's a fairly recent space, right? Or it's a fairly recent trend. It just seems like I've heard about it, more in recent years than I did, let's say 10 years ago. But how long has it really been around?
Well, I mean, if you think about Schrödinger, I think these are basically the leaders in the industry when it comes to molecular dynamic simulation software. And I think they have been around for over 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a very useful tool. It's actually heavily employed. But what's new, it's the combination with AI, combining AI with molecular dynamic simulation.
Got it. So the modeling process has been primarily, you still have to curate it and understand what you're looking at and still figure out what the software is outputting. Here, the AI is kind of helping you in that process to predict things based on existing information.
Yes. Yeah. And so there are many different ways how people are using AI and combine it with molecular dynamic simulation. But I would say the key application is to use machine learning to make those simulations faster, because traditional software, they basically solve physics-based mathematical equations.
Mm-hmm.
And this process is just very slow. And it's often way too slow to simulate like biological relevant events. And so where AI can help is to basically guide this process and tell the software, okay, these are slow motions and you can jump over them, and basically make this whole process faster.
Okay. So I'm curious if, in a perfect world, what's one molecule or compound you wish AI could fully simulate?
Well,
That's a loaded question.
Well, so I mean, ideally, at some point, we're actually going to be able to simulate entire cells or entire organisms. So this is the end goal. But I think in the meantime, it would be really great if we. So if I had to choose one type of protein, then it probably would be collagen fibrils and
Okay.
like and how they're interconnected. And so the reason being is because collagen is the most abundant protein in our body, and it's also the most abundant protein, I think, in most stroma of solid tumors. And if we had a good model that really would help us to understand how drugs are penetrating the ECM and the tumor microenvironment, I think that would be tremendously helpful.
And
Interesting.
collagen's a hot topic right now too, beyond trying to be in that space, right? There's a lot of companies trying to use collagen to do synthetic leathers and other applications.
Yeah, it is. And also, I mean, so traditionally, if you look at molecular biology, so we are really measuring mostly what's going on inside the cell. And it's much more difficult to really understanding what's going outside the cell, like in the extracellular matrix, just for different reasons. And I think this is where having a good model really would help us, because we can use microscopes and we could really already have a good understanding how to track things inside the cells. But this is not the case for the ECM.
Would you say a lot of your work with your new company is working with these simulation platforms, sort of bringing these technologies together, enabling, if you will, through existing platforms, but improving them, giving more power to the user?
Yes, I would say so. This is our primarily goal. We are also using AI as a standalone tool, just to for example, we're using generative models to replace molecular docking, because these AI models are actually 2 to 7 times faster and just as accurate, and at least when it comes to blind docking. Another goal is also to use AI to actually integrate it into traditional software and to make the software faster.
So that's kind of a good question that I think, I have a science background. Most of us come from working with scientists. Maybe you can, in layman's term, explain the ability to simulate docking and what that does for, moving this forward in terms of drug discovery.
Yeah. So now let's step back a little bit. So when we talk about molecular simulation, molecular docking, so what I mean is these are basically computer simulations, and which simulate how atoms move over time and in space. And so you can think of it as a virtual microscope that shows you how two molecules are interacting with each other. So for example, whether a protein and a ligand bind, how they're binding, how long they're binding. And this is incredibly useful. So we have two different aspects, right? So one is molecular docking. This is basically, it gives you static snapshots, which tells you, okay, this is the most likely position, how a ligand would bind. And then you have molecular dynamic simulation, which basically creates these animations. And if you combine both, this is a very useful tool, because first, for example, for virtual screening, you first use molecular docking to get plausible positions. And then you can follow up with molecular dynamic simulation. And this gives you a more realistic way whether these are actually true hits. And so molecular simulation basically helps you to filter out any false positives you might have gotten from docking. So I think this is probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah, and having something enable you to be, 2 times, 7 times faster is terribly important for making sure you accelerate your drug discovery, right?
Yes. The 2 to 7 times, it's basically on the docking side. And then if you go to the molecular dynamic simulation side, you actually can get much, much more acceleration. You're not talking about 2 to 7 times. You're talking about a 1000x or even more.
Wow.
Wow, and that's something AI has enabled that has not been around before, so that's great.
That's incredible. So it's needless to say, if a pharmaceutical company is not embracing this technology in a high, aggressively in a high growth manner internally, they're going to get left behind. That's what I gather. I mean,
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think about it, so it costs a lot of money to synthesize a molecule, a compound, right? And then to test it. The cost basically scales linearly for each compound you have to test. And every time you're testing a false positive you might have gotten from your virtual screening, you're actually wasting money. And as a rule of thumb, you can estimate that for every $100 you spend in GPU to run these MD simulation, you're actually going to save anywhere between 4,000 and 20,000 in wet lab expense.
Wow.
So I
Yeah.
would say using molecular dynamic simulation is probably like the easiest way to cut down costs.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you already see it. I mean, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, but this, transition from, well, let's make the biggest screening system we can possibly have. I really was part of the beginning of this in San Diego, where really big screening systems were built, and they're still in use today, but they're used a lot more smartly, I've found over the years, right?
Yes.
Only engage our high throughput and high content areas of our facility, unless, if you really have to, because the unlimited budget is no longer unlimited.
Yes.
And the throwing everything and the kitchen sink at a problem is no longer true either.
Yeah,
exactly. And
so,
sorry,
go ahead, please.
I think this is also maybe the same problem we are facing in AI. It's not only the idea to make things faster and to run them faster on a GPU. So I think the main goal is to make sure that the predictions are more accurate, because having things running faster, it's great. So it saves you GPU costs. But where the real, I think, benefit comes from is having more accurate predictions, because you're going to save in lab cost.
Gotcha. One question that comes to mind is, what currently would you say the biggest things holding this technology back? Like, is it computing power? Is it just, it just needs more attention in terms of how to integrate it? What would you say in terms of AI in general when it comes to simulation of biological interactions?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably the same thing like in every field where AI is used. It's just the lack of training data, like of high quality training data
Got it.
sets. And I think it's especially difficult when it comes to molecular dynamic simulation, because it's just so expensive to generate these high quality data sets. And yeah, I think this is probably a major bottleneck. One other reason, it's probably the models themselves. I think we really need different models to make bigger strides. And so we need to move, maybe we have to integrate more physics-based models, and we have to integrate models that are really able to reason, and maybe to understand the algorithm of biology, if you want to say.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes.
critical, understanding the algorithm of biology, because
Yes.
that takes an expertise in building the model. Yeah.
I just love that phrase, algorithm of biology.
It's going to be the new short.
That is a new short right there.
Like,
Algorithm of biology.
Do you find that the cost of the experiment is so high, right, that generates this quality data? Do you find that there's a lack of maybe collaboration in the space due to patent restrictions or intellectual property restrictions, that maybe if that data was available more widely, the models could learn quickly?
this is a good question.
Because it's a sacred space, right? Everyone's trying to like make headways in it.
Right. I think that's general the case in biotech, right? Like everybody's working in that tiny silos and nobody wants to share data. And yeah, I think this is definitely one reason. But this being said, even if everybody would collaborate, I still don't think that we would have enough quality data to really be able to create a foundational model, like a model that would be able to predict all interactions between all kind of different molecules. And I think in order to get there, we really need to work on better models and better learning algorithms.
This reminds me of Tony Reyna's episode where we were like, we need a federation.
Right. Revolution.
Right. Oh, there we go. Now we're talking. All right.
It's federation, but
Let's get Tony back on the show. The beginning, you always have to begin somewhere, right? It's fantastic. So that was starting with what's holding it back. And I have to say, it makes a lot of sense to me because there's so many other technologies that were, you hear a lot about, and people ask me as a roboticist. In fact, I was playing Call of Duty online, surprising Sura, last night with my cousin and a friend, and they're like, man, you're in robotics. When are they going to take over this whole AI thing? What's going on? It's like, well, we can't quite get cars to fully autonomously do their thing, so it's going to be a bit, right, before you get a bipedal apparatus walking around on its own.
Yeah, where's my robot helper?
Right. Exactly. For less than $20,000,
I would get a robot for 20,000 if he does all the chores. I would actually mess that.
I would sign up. Yeah, sign me up.
I feel like it's a magic price point these days. I feel like, $20K, it's like half of what I would pay for a car or something. That's fun,
cheaper than a nanny, that's for sure.
I'd rather pay the $20,000 for that than the $500 for something that supposedly mops my floor. But
supposedly.
Supposedly it's like, oh, didn't get here, didn't get there, right? Or it's complaining or it's stuck or something like that. This is going to be a while, and I figure all these technologies, including self-driving cars too. I mean, we're already seeing that it's kind of going through another rev of just how to think it through. We were using sort of approach one. Now we got to use another approach, but that takes learning from the previous experiments to figure out what you need. So it makes a lot of sense. And just knowing where to drive the next, for the next journey is really the key. What learnings did you take away? But that leads me to the next side of the question is what would you say the biggest success is so far in AI driven drug research that to you?
Well, I think there's, of course, AlphaFold. I think it's a massive success, right? I mean, I remember being in grad school and our professor telling us that it's basically impossible to solve this problem. And then I was thinking, well, what am I doing here?
Why am I in this class? I love when they tell you that.
Yeah, and we were always taught, so you just have to aim for really small incremental improvements. And I found this really depressing. But I think AlphaFold is a huge success story. And I would say in the industry, I really like what in Silico medicine is doing. I think they're really pioneering AI and agents, combining AI with robotics. And so they actually developed their first AI drug, and which is I think it's entering clinical phase 3. And I think this is really encouraging. And then there's also Accenture. I think they have 4 AI drugs in phase 1 and phase 2. And I think these are the trailblazers, and more are to come. And I would expect that within the next 2 years, we're probably going to see the first AI drugs hitting the market.
Wow. What if they'll have to have special labeling? This is an AI drug.
I was just thinking, there's an asterisk developed by AI.
Exactly, like a tiny robot.
That is so cool. Can you imagine
Wow.
the impact in society to have the first, AI-driven exploration of these things available for the whole community? That's amazing.
It's amazing. And then also, just again, taking in Silico as an example. So I think it took them 18 months to actually validate, preclinical validate the drug candidate, and instead of the usual 4 to 7 years. So this is a massive cut, right? In terms of time and resources that was saved. And I think it's a great proof of concept.
And in some respects, if we get to the point where they're, life-saving medicines available, that's the difference between someone who makes it, who's got, stage 4 cancer, and someone who doesn't, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think there are a lot of naysayers and say, oh no, we know it's not perfect. And I do believe it's not perfect, of course. But even if we just can cut the time in half, right? These are millions of lives that could be saved. And I think it's really, really dangerous to try to accelerate this progress and to like, I think we need to take some risks. And I think these are risks worth taking.
So you're saying even if there are things that could be better, even if there are naysayers, let's try to keep it in perspective and not slow down this innovation.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where even in like the self-driving car space, like, yes, the end goal is to have a car that's fully autonomous, but there's all these technologies on the way that have saved a ton of lives.
Yes.
Technologies that figure out when you're getting sleepy, technologies that figure out whether you're leaving the lane, bumping your car back into the lane, keeping you from hitting the back of a semi-truck, whatever. I mean, all the, this is like way improvement over where we were just 10 years ago. And I feel like it's the same here, right? I mean, any incremental improvement is an improvement for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I also think that we don't need, so ideally we're going to get to general AI, right? And ideally we're going to get there soon. And I have a lot of hope that we will get there sooner. But even in the meantime, a lot is also about how you use existing technologies, how you build really efficient workflows, and really to get the best out of it. So if you look at AlphaFold, it wasn't a new algorithm, right? They didn't come up with a new learning algorithm. They use existing architecture and just were able to combine it like very cleverly and also like using massive data sets. But I think there's a lot to get. So we can get a lot of it just by being creative and by being really smart about how we build these pipelines.
But it's also, like you said, it's nothing, sometimes you don't need anything like novel. Sometimes you can take something that scientists have been working on for a while, but then you put the power of this technology behind it. And it's like, million scientists doing a million experiments per second that get you there closer, right?
Yes, absolutely. And also, if you take something that already has been around, something like molecular dynamic simulation, that is physics-based and that scientists do trust to some extent, right? And if you just then dock AI onto it just to make this process faster, it's also an easier sell to scientists because it's not a black box, right?
Yeah.
So you're just using an existing technology and make it more efficient.
Yeah, they can see what they're bolting onto the technology that they understand. That's a really important point. How you convey that is so critical to getting faster adoption, because it's always better to come from a place that than to just dive into something completely blind. So yeah, really, really good point.
But it's also the whole notion of like peer review, right? Like you have to be accepted by the community for it to move forward.
Exactly. It's peer review, and it's also like passing regulatory hurdles, right? Because I mean, the FDA, they do expect some level of transparency. They have to understand how you got to your conclusions. And it's more difficult if you just have a complete AI black box, as if you actually introduce it to more traditional tools.
Fantastic segue, because as far as regulatory hurdles, are there any specific ones that you see today that maybe, like you said, make putting too much assumption in the AI solution and presenting it that way, right? When you're trying to release a new pharmaceutical, or what would you say would be a big hurdle today that we need to transition out of to make it work better?
I think the biggest hurdle is really the black box nature of pure AI. Yeah? So like not understanding how the input is mapping to the output. And there is a lot of effort now to trying to understand how models are learning and how they get to their solutions. And I think this is a major hurdle, really, this black box nature. But I also think that over time, I mentioned this earlier, we are probably going to come up with new learning algorithms, like less statistical modeling, which we're using right now in deep learning, and maybe moving more towards reasoning models. So, and it's going to be much easier to understand such a model.
You have to figure out how it's thinking in order to trust it, right?
Right now, exactly. Right now, you have to understand how it's thinking. But then if you're actually moving towards reasoning model, it basically will think similar to humans, and then it's much easier to understand.
Yeah, that came up with Tony's episode, right? The hallucinations.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
It's like, oh, I was dreaming up this molecule. What do you think, Ingrid, right?
It's like the six-fingered human all over again.
Yeah, Yeah, great. All right. AI's talking to me now in the mornings. But I wanted to roll back to kind of, our earlier segment. And one thing I wanted to ask specifically is like, where in this process is the human expertise just absolutely unreplaceable, at least based on today's information?
I would say that we still need humans' expertise, to detect any hallucinations. And we also need human reasoning. We need logic. And
Yeah.
AI, the deep learning, deep neural networks, they are not good at that, right? That's why they're not good at math. And I think this is where humans are still have the upper hand. And this is where we still need humans in the loop.
To be fair, some humans don't have logic.
AI is great at producing output, but not really that great at curating necessarily what to do with it. Yeah, it's so fascinating to see how this is transitioning into the industry, but also the effects it's already having. And I can't wait to see AI drugs, coming into the market where it'll be interesting how those are marketed, right? How's the pharmaceutical
now made
market
with AI.
right? Powered by AI, and they're the typical pharma commercial, right? And then at the end, right? Powered by AI. How's that gonna?
Right.
just to see people's reaction.
One day.
What would you say is the biggest untapped opportunity right now in this space? Just AI and medicine in general.
I think the biggest untapped opportunity is creating new methods to generate actually new kinds of data, right? Because, and I'm thinking specifically about real-time in vivo data, because if you think about it, like almost all data we're using to train AI, these are static data. So we have biopsies, blood draws, etc., sequencing data. And what it's really missing are more dynamic data, like real people dynamic data, because if you were able to use that and to model what's actually going on a dynamic level, inside the body, I think this would give us much better insights into disease and how we be able to treat those.
And what skills would you say for folks that want to get into this space and get into the industry? What areas should they be focusing on in their education as well as early work experience?
Or even current scientists wanting to pivot, let's say, come work for you,
Sure.
Right. So I think the best way to get into is just by doing, right? And just start out with a project. And then once you have a good grasp, how to run a model, how to train a model, then maybe getting more into the math behind it to get a good grasp of the mathematical foundation. And I think if you really want to then work on AI, especially as an independent researcher, and I think like one of you guys mentioned that earlier, that it's really difficult for a small company or for an individual to compete with these big companies or corporations, right? Because it just costs so much to generate those data and training these models. If you're actually moving towards logic-based reasoning models, I think about synthetic programming, for example. So these are actually models that, because they use reasoning and not statistical inference, you're going to need much less data. And I think these are and I think this is where the big breakthroughs are coming from or will come from in the future. And this is also an area where small companies or even individuals can really contribute just by coming up with smarter algorithms.
Yep.
So it's not so much using the same approach we're already having and just trying to generate more data. It's actually coming up with new approaches.
See, even AI needs to read some of these self-help books, work smarter, not harder, right?
Exactly, right.
But it seems like it's a good point right now, right? As you guys are moving towards more reasoning-based models, this is a pivotal opportunity to get in the door if you're interested in this kind of work, because you can take a new look on an old problem, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. And I think that the old models or like the traditional deep learning models, they do have the applications. And so wherever you need to model continuous problems, so they are really helpful. But whenever you're dealing with discrete problems and when you have to make decisions that are logical, then I think we do need another approach. Great time to get into it.
Where's Spock when you need him?
Logic. That's right. I wonder how Spock would deal with AI, right? If it was Spock encountered. I mean, obviously in Star Trek they had, sort of pseudo, actor AI, but in the modern world, how would a character like Spock deal with what we're generating today?
Sorry, Ingrid, we're nerds here.
We're nerds. We're nerds.
But I never watched Star Trek, so
Okay.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. Trekkies and Star Wars and Trekkies. You know, it's like they rarely intermingle.
And gamers.
Is this a guy with the two fingers?
The
Or the two, like those?
Yeah, the...
Okay.
Oh, that made balloons!
That's right. That's
Wow.
right. Oh, you must be
Oh, I
on a Mac.
forgot.
Right.
I
big
have my
fans.
reactions turned
Macs
off.
are the best. Look at that. We even got balloons on the episode.
So this
First
does
time ever
balloons. Okay.
on this episode. We
There you go.
Yeah, Apple, the Mac AI is always looking for an opportunity to chime in.
Looking.
It's always looking for an opportunity to chime in. It's like, oh wait, somebody wants to party.
It's so funny. This actually reminds me. A few days ago, I was with my husband at the vet because our dog was sick, and they are using AI now, right? So they're recording the sessions, and
Yeah.
and then they left the room, and my husband, we were talking, and like baby talking, singing to our dogs, and then we realized that they actually forgot to turn off the recorder.
Oh,
So you do have to be careful.
we got a whole bunch of notes in your record.
Yep.
The AI model is listening.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I have to say though, this is one of those technologies, you know, I'm sure there's mistakes being made all the time and how it's used and for, you know, forgetting to do certain things. But I gotta say, last time I saw my doctor, he's like, yeah, you know, you mind if I do the thing with the app? And he puts the phone down. It actually felt like it was way more engaging because he didn't have to think about a single
Yes.
note, didn't pick up the pen once. Even the numbers like the blood pressure and all this stuff actually got put into a section. He goes, yeah, here's the report it generated already. I'm like, wow, that's impressive. That really is.
Yeah.
Now give me my AI generated drugs.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I probably will raise an eyebrow if I see on my doctor it says, you know, powered by AI next to his name.
Got his name tag.
Great. Yeah. Well, are there any and this can be multiple takeaways, but do you have a key takeaway for listeners of the show?
Yeah, I think we touched upon this earlier. AI is not perfect and not yet, but it doesn't have to be to be really useful. And I think the key takeaway is to be optimistic and to be like having a can-do mindset and just using what we already have, you know, and to use this in the best way. And because what we have is incredibly useful.
Yeah, I think
that's true. Yeah, that's great. I think that's what Tony was saying, right? It's like AI is the 3-year-old and you're complaining about him coloring outside the lines, right?
Yeah.
Be optimistic. It's doing amazing things already.
I mean, but I'm not even sure about a 3-year-old because I don't think like there are few 3-year-olds that could calculate interatomic energies.
We've elevated it. Yes, we've elevated it to the next age group.
Maybe the top 0.0001% 3-year-olds, but yeah.
So it's really, really good at certain areas.
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, I think the thing is in society in general, there tends to be a, you know, kind of we blow up the end result, the target, right? But you know, getting there is such a big part of the process, and AI is no different. Self-driving cars are no different. Robotics are no different. I mean, there's so many things that were in academia for so many years and took forever to get out of academia. It's because it needed to be refined and massaged, you know, before it could be useful in industry. But this is to see all these uses already. This has got to be one of the fastest developing technologies.
Absolutely.
To go from when I was in engineering school, the only discussion of AI, it wasn't even AI, it was just neural networks, right? They talked about the weighted network, right? Yeah, it's like, okay, right, great process, but that was all just in a textbook. It was one little chapter in a textbook.
Yeah, predicting digits.
Yeah, predicting digits, right? You know, using the Sun workstation that, you know, my watch has more power than
subsystems.
Yeah. Oh boy, yeah, that's dating myself. Sun Microsystems. Long part of Oracle after all these years, but I think it's fantastic. Anything else you wanted to bring up, Sura, Elizabeth?
I mean, I'm just excited. It sounds like SimAtomic is doing a lot in this space, and you know, it's amazing to have a founder on the show that can speak to accelerating innovation and drug discovery. I'm very excited for you and your company.
Thank you.
So
Appreciate
tell
it.
us a little bit more about SimAtomic. Is it just you, or you've got some employees already, or team?
Yeah.
Or?
So it is, I'm a solo founder. It's
Okay.
self-funded, but I do work with a team of 2 people.
Okay.
They're computational chemists who do help with analyzing the results and just getting the feedback you need to really build this robust pipeline. And yeah, it's a very early company. So we just went public or launched officially at the beginning of this year. And but we're just wrapping up our first collaboration with a research institute we've been working with in California. So this is really exciting. And yeah, we have a lot of new projects coming up.
Very cool.
Fantastic. I have a feeling you're going to have a line out the door.
Yes, yes.
With folks coming to you for business. So super excited about that and what's in the future for AI and the business you're building around it. So so now is the time, the pick of the week segment of the show
favorite
is here.
time.
That's right. That's right. And again, the pick of the week, I think we talked about it a little bit, but it can be anything if you have one. A book you're reading, a tool that you're using, we've had products. I've actually got a product today.
Yes, yes. I want to see what you picked up.
I picked it up while I was in California. Yeah.
California has all the good stuff.
It does.
Ingrid, were you warned? Do you have a pick of the week?
Did watch your previous shows, so I actually did.
Fantastic.
And I do have a pick of the week. I think it's DeepMind's. It's called cell to sentence model. And it's basically a model that lets you interact with single cell RNA-seq data in plain English. So you can ask you questions of what cell type is it, or you can even generate like new cell types. You can basically run in silico perturbation experiments, asking, so what would happen if I would inhibit this pathway? Can you come up with a cell? How would it look like? And yeah, I think this is super exciting. And I actually tried this model, but I think I have to fine tune a little bit. I don't think I did it right, because whenever I ask any question, the answer is always it's a T cell.
You're like, you sound like some CDMOs. It's a T cell.
It's a T cell. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
What else could it be?
So in theory, I think it's a really great model. I just have to get it to work. Yeah.
Very cool. I'm inhibiting everything when I play on that.
Exactly.
Sir, do you have one?
I don't have one
Elizabeth,
this week.
Elizabeth? Okay. All right. Well, and how fitting that the Apple camera algorithm picked up on the let's see, is it going to do it for me? No, probably not.
Did you turn off?
I think it is turned off, but my pick of the week, I went to the mothership, or the spaceship as they call it. It's the big circle in Cupertino. And anyway, I guess there was Steve Jobs really liked this Japanese porcelain company, and so anyway, they licensed actual Apple mugs through that. And so I needed a new no, I didn't really need a new coffee mug, but
he spent the whole day eating ice cream and was sending us all pictures.
I didn't spend the whole day.
I'm so jealous right now.
All right, yeah. They if you ever find yourself in Cupertino and you like landscape and arborists and things like that, the trees and fitting creating like a whole ecosystem. I don't think anyone on the planet, maybe except the Singapore airport, I hear, is pretty incredible in terms of the flowers and the different things that they have there, and the climate is perfect for it. But in Cupertino, Apple, they must spend tens of millions of dollars on just their landscaping. And it's pretty incredible. So, and you can just work from the roof of the store, right? If you want.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So you can just, this nice desk, go, hang out and basically be in a little oasis of the forests in the middle of Cupertino.
That sounds great. That sounds really, really nice.
Anyway, yeah. And they'll get you for a mug on the way out.
Now, does that mug plug into anything? Is it self-heating and cooling, or is it just a mug?
AI powered.
It's just retro, and it's a logo that hasn't been used for many years with Apple. So it's the original rainbow logo. Anywho, so that's our picks of the week. And well, how can our listeners and viewers get in touch with your company?
You can just you find us on LinkedIn. You can visit our website. It's SimAtomic.com. And yeah, I think the easiest is just over the website, SimAtomic.com.
Okay. SimAtomic.com. Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
SimAtomic.com.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's one that can that's one that can catch on. I think. Yeah, SimAtomic. That's a great.
It clearly says what it does.
Yeah. I feel sometimes the hardest part is to come up with a name and a domain name that is not already taken. That's the first step.
Oh yeah.
We had the same problem. What do we call this podcast?
Yeah, it has to be long enough to where we're still going to be into like the 7 or 8 letter domains, because 3 letters and 4 letters are long gone. If you unless you want to have a suffix part of the domain that's longer than the prefix, right? You could do that. Like I remember for the longest time it was .net, .org, and .com. And then all of a sudden, the domain registry, they're just like, oh, you know what? We'll just make a business out of this. You can have pretty much any ending you want in the domain system today.
Yeah, I would assume that .ai is probably the next big one, since everything.
Oh yeah,
They've been using .io, but yeah. Yeah,
I've seen a lot of .ais in email lists. We were going through the. Well, it makes sense, and those will get bought up, I'm sure, pretty quickly. Well, Ingrid, really, really fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for joining us. And I'm super excited. I think we all are super excited to see how your company develops and what, the work that comes out. So,
well, thank you so much for having me. It was
really
great.
excited for that. And with that, this is another episode of Helical Brew that's brewed. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Helical Brew. We're glad to have you with us. For more episodes, please visit our website at helicalbrew.com. That's helicalbrew.com.